In this tutorial, we're going to review how to use gradients in Photoshop. First thing we're going to do is open up an image, because we're not just going to build a gradient by itself. We're actually going to put a gradient on top of something, because it's pretty rare you'd ever use gradients and have that be the entire image. So I'm going to go through my image library here and pull up something that we can actually use. Let's see. I'm going to do something that's kind of like something you'd use if you were working for a travel magazine, or you were wanting to build a flyer, that kind of thing. So here's a good image outside of Santa Fe. And what we're going to do is pick out a spot here. First, we're going to add a new layer, and if you've been watching other tutorials, you'll know how to do that. You hit Command, Shift, and N. Pulls up the new layer control panel, hit OK, and here's your new layer right here. So what this means is we're not going to actually be doing anything to the photo itself. We're just going to be using everything on these other layers we're going to add on top. So very first thing we're going to do, because we're going to make this kind of like a brochure or that kind of thing, we're going to come up here and select an area, and we're just going to add a little block, highlight a little block here down at the bottom, and instead of coming over to this to these colors to add that gradient, or to add just a regular color like we've done in the past, we're going to come over here, click on the gradient tool, and as you can see, it already has a pre-select color gradient, and what this one's going to do is it's going to go from this kind of off green to transparent. So anytime you see those little blocks, it means it's going to be transparent. So something like that, if we come over here, what it's going to look like, and drag it all the way to the bottom, is it's going to look like that. You see how it still maintains some of the transparency? If we don't like that, we can maybe come up a little bit higher, drag it down not quite as far, and you can see we've added a nice little layer here that you could add text on or anything like that. So we could come over here and say, visit Santa Fe. Come make that a lot bigger. Center it. And we'll go change the color too. We'll change that to a white. Now if we see that and we think that maybe this isn't quite enough, we want to make it a little bit, just a little bit stronger, we can get rid of this layer and create a new one and do the same thing. Grab a rectangle, grab the select tool, draw a rectangle, and now we're going to play around with a few different types of gradients. You can use a few of these different ones, but what you're usually going to stick with the main gradient tool, and you're going to make your changes up here. So up here in your tool menu, you can choose between different color options. So right now we could go from this kind of green to white, or I could change it so it's a little bit closer, so go green to kind of this gray, and what that will do is we'll come over here and click on the gradient, and that gives more of it what you would think of as a true gradient. It doesn't use any transparency, anything like that. Hit Control Z to reverse it, and then you can see that's a linear gradient. You can also come over here to a radial, an angle, reflected, and a diamond gradient. To be completely honest, I probably use a linear one 99.999% of the time, but I'm sure at some point one of these may come in handy for you. So you can see what happens when you use these. This radial one gives that main color right here in the center a lot more distinction. Let me change these colors up. I'll go black and white just so you can get a feel for it. So I'll do the radial one again, and you can see that white start there, that black starts out in the bottom and fades to white. For you to do that for the angled, you'd see the same thing. Kind of looks almost like a clock, 3D clock, how it turns like that. And you can do the diamond as well. where you kind of see that diamond shape in the middle. For the sake of what we're doing here, I'm actually going to switch back and pick out kind of that color we had before and go back to the transparency, because I really like the way that that looks. And I'm going to draw that here. And the only difference, what I'm going to do now, I'm going to unselect it. I'm going to bring this up a little bit so you can definitely see the text. And I'm going to add a shadow right behind here. And to add shadows in Photoshop, it's really easy. I'll click and duplicate this, come to this layer 1, and I'm going to come up to Filter, go to Blur, then go to Gaussian Blur. And let's see, probably make that about 2. And what that's going to do is, oh, and with the Gaussian blur, usually you do want it to be black. So let me go make that black. Okay, there we go. Now let me go run this Gaussian blur again. Okay, and there we go. So trying it at about 24 right there, hit OK. Now you can see we've added a really nice black shadow. It's not too overpowering, but it kind of gives a feeling of this is on a different layer than the photograph itself. So this is a great way of being able to use gradients and in combination with shadows and different things like that to give some great style to your Photoshop development. If you went through this, great job, congratulations. If you have any questions, please feel free to let me know.